Hello, and welcome to my series, I Am Not a Changeling. My name is Miss Ellie Logan, and I am not a changeling. I'm just autistic. This series will go into various facets of autism, and I will delve into some of the symptoms, talk about my own experiences, and go through what the process is like for getting diagnosed. And today, it's all about the symptoms. Woohoo! No, Homer. This episode is not about you.
No!
That's right, symptoms. The signs that show whether or not you have autism. And the most common symptom of autism is, drumroll please, sensory issues. And boy do I have those. Sensory issues are basically an autistic person's difficulty with processing everyday sensory input. It has to do with your senses, taste, smell, sound, touch, sight. You can either be hypersensitive to it, which is known as overreactive sensory issues, or hyposensitive or underreactive. And these can fluctuate from day to day, or even moment to moment. I, for one, mostly tend to be hypersensitive to things. Loud noises, bright lights, and strong smells especially. But this was definitely obvious when I was younger. I got really frustrated when people would play songs by One Direction or Justin Bieber. It was because they were played so often that it just led to me getting frustrated when I heard them. Also, one time, about 5 years ago or so, I was at a restaurant for my granddad's birthday, and it was a lovely place, amazing food, surrounded by family. The only downside, however, was that there was a large children's birthday party also eating at the same time. And I get it, they're just being kids, having fun, and eating out at a fancy restaurant. They're probably just excited, but still, they were just so loud. It hurt my head. Now, at the time, I had a really large pair of headphones that I wore literally everywhere. And on that night, I decided to leave them at home because I didn't want to appear rude by wearing them and not contributing to the conversation. Sadly, this was my downfall for the night, as the children continued to be loud for hours. And it only got worse from there. After the birthday party left, things were good for a bit. The restaurant calmed down a little and I could finally relax. That was until a hen party arrived. And they were so incredibly loud. It was as if they didn't realize there were other people in there, or that there could be people with sensory issues eating alongside them. And that night was the only time that I ever broke down in tears over sensory overload. And ever since then, I've been wearing my headphones, because I'm not risking it happening again. It literally led me to feel physical pain. That's what sensory overload can do to autistic people, because the brain cannot process all of the information entering it at that moment. So when that happens, we need to leave the area causing us discomfort in the first place. It's also why I don't like going to parties. One symptom that is commonly overlooked is visual snow. This is basically static over your vision, so everything you see looks like you're staring through a really old television set. And while this isn't really a necessary symptom for a diagnosis of autism, it most definitely can be a sign. And another that is somewhat common among us autistic folk is stimming, or self-stimulating behaviours, if you want to be somewhat professional. This typically involves a repetitive action like rocking back and forth or bouncing your knee, or even chewing things, which I am incredibly guilty of. One of my more common stims involves me making rather weird sounds. This is a vocal stim, and it is rather common. It can be either complete nonsense, or it can be cat noises. Either way, I stim vocally, and it can be quite funny to hear, especially if you don't expect it. But just as a warning for some of the neurotypical people watching this, don't make fun of someone for stimming, because a lot of autistic people can be quite sensitive and even self-conscious around the idea of doing it in front of people. I myself had a moment fairly recently where I needed to stim in college and literally went into another room so my classmates wouldn't catch me stimming in front of them. This mainly involved me listening to music and flapping my hands until I was ready to head back and do some work. Luckily, it was on a day where there weren't as many people in, and our lecturer had left for something. So nobody really minded me nipping into another part of the studio for a couple minutes just to decompress and get my head straight. But on the topic of hand flapping, that is another stim, and it's also an incredibly common one, to the point where it can be a sign in incredibly young children. Now, it may look silly to someone that doesn't understand it, but to the autistic person in question, this is a way of helping them regulate their emotions. It also allows us to calm down and focus on a single area of the body. Another incredibly common autistic symptom is the inability to take a joke or get/understand sarcasm. And while at times they may be right, a lot of the time the autistic person's joke just isn't that funny, or it's just wrong. Well, either that or, from what I experience, when I then continue and build on the joke, they just tell me that it's just a joke. And yeah, I know that. I'm just building on it, adding to it, trying to have a laugh. It's the same people that are meant to be normal that don't get my obviously superior sense of humor. The most obvious autistic symptom, however, is the avoidance of eye contact. And I didn't realize how much I did it until I actually learned I had autism. I mostly look beside people's heads, like at the wall or above their eyes, their mouth, or wherever I can so that I don't have to look at their eyes. It can be incredibly stressful to us and has even been shown to cause us physical discomfort in our brain due to underactivity in the dorsal parietal cortex. This is especially difficult when you compare us to our autistic peers. They expect us to meet their bizarre expectations of politeness when our brains just don't work that way. Literally, the structure of our brains is physically different. And one other symptom that can point us towards autism is the difficulty with sleep. This can be due to irregularities in melatonin levels, as our brains are built differently. It also takes us approximately 11 minutes longer to fall asleep. We also tend to experience less REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is responsible for processing memories and skills and helping us restore our minds. This difficulty can also be caused by anxiety or even sensory issues, which is incredibly common in autistic people. Now, when I was about primary 7, I didn't really get to play as much at home. Need I remind you that at the time I was about 10 or 11. And anyway, because of my parents' work schedules, I didn't really get to play with my toys all that often. So, to combat this lack of play at home, I would get up early and play with my toys in my room. And ever since then, I've been waking up at stupid o'clock in the morning. And my body hates it, especially now that I'm in my 20s. This is especially difficult when you realise that a poor quality of sleep can actually worsen autism symptoms. Which is probably why I like Set It Off's song, "I'll Sleep When I'm Dead," more than the average person probably should. Another extraordinarily common autism symptom is social difficulties. For me, I find it hard to tell how other people are feeling, unless it's really obvious. I'll either think that they're annoyed with me or mad at me, and I'll be incredibly nervous about it. It's led to me feeling quite down at various points and having difficulties valuing my own self-worth. Social cues are also difficult. They're the non-verbal signs that people give off in order to express a situation. This includes things like vocal tone, expression, body language, things like that. Subtle things that are difficult for autistic people like myself to pick up on. We also find it difficult when people respond to us with an answer that doesn't match what we asked. Say, for example, there are two people, Jimmy and Ezra. Jimmy is autistic. He doesn't have autism. Ezra, however, is autistic, and they are both going out to the zoo. A conversation between the two might follow like this.
Is it cold outside?
You don't need a jacket.
Okay, but is it cold?
I just said you don't need a jacket.
Okay, I hear you. But that doesn't answer my question. Is it or is it not cold outside?
And I literally just said you don't need a jacket.
And so that situation goes on until the two get into a fight. Or not really, but you get my point. What went wrong in that situation is as follows. Jimmy thought that Ezra was asking whether or not he needed a jacket, in a subtle way. Jimmy thought that Ezra was asking whether or not he needed a jacket in a subtle way, as autistic neurotypicals tend to do. Ezra got frustrated because Jimmy didn't give him a yes or no answer, which was what he was looking for. He wanted to know if it was cold outside so he would know how to dress appropriately. The two didn't get what the other meant, and so that led to conflict. But let's see an alternative take on the situation involving clear and concise communication.
Is it cold outside?
You don't need a jacket.
Okay, but is it cold?
It's about 15 degrees outside, so I'd say no. It's getting warmer.
Alright, thanks. I'll put in a hoodie and see how I feel.
Notice how in the second situation, Jimmy realised what Ezra was actually asking him. He then communicated with him clearly and gave an answer with clear information. For some reason, autistic people seem to be allergic to clear communication. When speaking with autistic people, be very concise in what you say, as we can get confused very easily if you speak in riddles, or imply something rather than saying it outright. If my autistic followers follow this very simple step, then it will definitely make a difference in your autistic peers' lives. Now, one good resource that I found to help me with my autism diagnosis was the RADS-R questionnaire, and while not the most reliable way to screen for autism, it can definitely be a good starting point for your diagnosis journey. I took it once before I got diagnosed and got about 130 something. Then I retook the test recently in order to make this episode, and somehow I scored 142. I feel that in this context, it is important to tell you that the minimum score you need for an autism confirmation is a 65. But what can I say, I've always been a bit of an overachiever. One gripe that I have with this test, however, is the way that it's written. It makes no wiggle room for any doubt that the answers may have. The complexity that the answers may have to an autistic person does not seem to match the very box-like options given on this multiple choice test. Still, I digress. For what it's worth, it still is a really good tool, and, as I said earlier, an amazing starting point for a diagnosis journey. I suggest that you take the RADS-R test, even if you are 100% sure that you're autistic. Both as just a laugh, but also as a way to have that confirmation for yourself. But to put a long story short, those are some of the most prevalent or obvious symptoms of autism. Hopefully these can be of some help, and may even lead you in the right direction, whether that be towards an autism diagnosis or whatever else you want. And regardless of your neurotype, you will be welcome on my page. Other than that, just remember, I'm not a changeling, and neither are you.